AOC clearly thought this was her big moment to shine. Roll the clip.
There's no discussion about gun violence in Chicago without talking about Indiana. Because the violence and the mothers that we have to comfort are losing children due to the guns and the carnage and the lawlessness unleashed by those states.
During a House hearing, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez launched into one of her familiar tangents, arguing for stripping Americans of their gun rights. But Congressman Clay Higgins wasn't buying it, and with a single line, he shut her down cold.
Now I ask you all, what happened to that country, man? The country where homes were built in cities with no locks.
That's why today we're breaking it all down, because we're not here to play partisan games. We're here for plain old common sense. So if you still believe in thinking for yourself, hit that subscribe button and let's dive right in.
Let's talk facts here. There was a lot of discussion about New York City. There is no discussion about gun violence in New York City without discussing the iron pipeline that is Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and honorary mention to Ohio, where 70% of likely illegal trafficked guns found in New York City come from.
AOC's argument is straightforward. She points to the so-called iron pipeline, claiming that guns legally purchased in states with looser laws, like Florida or Georgia, are then trafficked into cities, such as New York. In doing so, she frames the issue as a supply problem tied to interstate regulation, placing the blame squarely on red states. The focus is on punishing the supplier, while conveniently ignoring criminal intent on the user's side. She makes the same case when shifting to violence in Chicago, again pointing the finger at neighboring Indiana and the alleged flow of these weapons across state lines.
There's no discussion about gun violence in Chicago without talking about Indiana. Because the violence and the mothers that we have to comfort are losing children due to the guns and the carnage and the lawlessness unleashed by those states. I move on. Every week in recent memory, we have had at least one mass. This is not normal. Not only is it not normal, it is internationally embarrassing and delegitimizing to the United States.
So yes, there's a certain irony coming from someone whose party put Biden in the White House and ran Kamala as vice president, yet now suddenly frets about how other countries view the United States. Not long ago, the former president appeared completely lost on the world stage. Then there's Chicago, home to some of the strictest gun laws in the country. It's true that nearly half the guns used in crimes there come from out of state, but that fact actually undercuts AOC's argument. It shows that people determined to commit crimes will find a way, no matter how many regulations are on the books. You don't have to look far for proof. Canada and several European countries have tough gun laws too, yet violence persists, or criminals simply switch to other weapons. But AOC didn't stop there. She doubled down and tried to zero in on what she called the real problem, saying this.
Now let's talk about why. Let's talk about one thing more important to lobbyists and the gun industry than children, than houses of faith, than human beings. Let's talk about profit. In 2020, again, more than 45,000 Americans died by gunfire, reflecting an almost threefold increase from 2015. Are those statistics correct?
That's accurate.
So in your view, are you seeing a correlation between gun profits and gun deaths in the United States?
Yes.
AOC draws a very specific correlation, suggesting a direct link between the financial success of the arms industry and the nation's fatality rates. At that point, her focus shifts away from the weapon itself and straight to the money driving the political debate. She pivots to a narrative of massive corporate lobbying and big spending aimed at blocking any so-called safety legislation. After making that broad financial claim, she tries to steer the conversation toward what she labels the real root causes, a move that conveniently distracts from the glaring failures of her own party's policies.
For context, the NRA spent about $250 million in 2020 alone. That's more than twice the entire salary of Congress combined in 1 year, lobbying against gun safety laws. There's also this discussion about anything but a gun, but that these are about violent people. But yet we aren't doing anything about addressing the actual root causes of misogyny, where 2/3 of mass are connected to domestic violence, or the emergence of white supremacy radicalization, mass incarceration, and poverty, and the connections between that and mass in our communities. I yield my time. Thank you, Madam.
First, dragging identity politics into the gun debate is the last thing we need. It only muddies the facts. Second, someone should remind AOC that correlation does not equal causation. And third, throwing around numbers, without context proves very little. In 2023, nearly 47,000 people died from gun-related injuries. That same year, motor vehicle accidents claimed over 43,000 lives, and even simple falls accounted for almost 47,000 deaths. So what's the solution? Ban cars or tell people to stop walking upstairs? Obviously not. The takeaway is simple. Dumping statistics on a problem without honest discussion or common sense gets us nowhere. Thankfully, Clay Higgins was there to cut through the noise and bring some clarity. Let's hear what he had to say.
I'm going to bring us back in time to World War II. America's population, 140 million. 15 million American men came home from World War II. And there was weapons everywhere. We'll talk about mental challenge. My father was one of those men who was a Navy pilot in World War II. He came back from the war and built his family. I'm the seventh of his 8 children. We had guns everywhere. There was virtually no regulation. Any child in the 50s could buy a weapon from any seller if daddy sent them with the money. We didn't have mass shootings. It wasn't until 1968 in America that serial numbers were even required on weapons sold in this country. You order weapons through the Sears catalog by the mail.
That's the uncomfortable conversation most people would rather avoid, and for obvious reasons. For starters, the breakdown of family structures matters. Decades ago, 2-parent households were far more common. Today, that reality has changed dramatically. Another issue is how these incidents are defined. Now, a mass shooting can refer to almost any event where shots are fired, regardless of whether anyone is killed. In the past, the federal government defined it much more narrowly, as an incident in which at least 4 people were killed. The media deserves plenty of credit for that shift. Then there's the pursuit of fame. Sociologists have repeatedly shown that the desire for notoriety motivates many of these attacks. It's a well-documented pattern. Clay Higgins underscored this point by sharing a personal story from his own experience, offering some sharp and insightful observations along the way.
You know what these houses did not have? That were built 100 years ago in cities in America. You know what they did not have, Commissioner? Locks. Now I ask you all, what happened to that country, man? A country where homes were built in cities with no locks. A country where guns were everywhere and virtually not regulated at all. Where millions of Americans, 14 million Americans came back. It's 11% of the population at the time after World War II. And here we sit today where an entire once proud Democratic Party is presenting unbelievably unconstitutional laws to press upon our nation, and we have a police commissioner that says he would go home to home and confiscate legally owned weapons.
At the end of the day, it really comes down to this. Guns are inanimate objects. Without intent, they pose no threat. Yes, smarter regulations may help reduce harm, and that's a conversation worth having, but it has to stay within the bounds of the Second Amendment. Cross that line, and you're talking about government overreach and a direct infringement on the individual rights the Constitution is meant to protect. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, keep thinking.